Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goosejunkies. Thank you so much for tuning in each and every week. Sorry this episode has taken a while to get out, but we have a more ambitious style episode for you today for episode 13, mind you. And we decided that since 13 is a lucky number, or I guess unlucky number, we're going to do luck based stories for this episode. And we have a lot to cover. We have It Came From Beneath the Sink from Goosebumps, facing it off with Nightmare Room's Locker 13, and then the final face-off will be The Tale of the Blue Monkey from Ghosts of Fear Street. I'm joined tonight with Alejandro over at Goosebumps for Dummies and Bruce over at Goosebumps Enthusiasts. How are you both doing tonight?
I'm doing fairly good. B, if you're watching this, Scooby-Doo Zombie Island was kind of mid. I turned it off because I was kind of bored. Return to Horrorland, don't read it, and yeah, that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Doing-
Alejandro, what about you? How are you doing?
like I said, I was fine. I'm currently reading a terrible book with a terrible joke about the title. Yeah, I'm sorry for delaying this episode, y'all. Kind of my fault because I'm very stupid and I didn't read the books in time. Yeah, I'm doing fine.
It's all good. We're here now, and that's all we can ask for. Unfortunately, BD Horror had some schedule things going on with school, so he could not make it. So we have his thoughts for the things in question tonight. It's the same thing with Spongy. He's had a rough patch going on, and we have his thoughts as usual as well. So let's get right into the discussion because luck-based stories in kids horror, as we kind of have found, at least in the R.L. Stein sphere of things, kind of run very similar to each other. And the first one that ever existed under this formula, or what we call the It Came From Beneath the Sink formula, is It Came From Beneath the Sink. So, Bruce, why don't you start us off with It Came From Beneath the Sink, at least the book, and what it's about?
All right, everybody. So, It Came From Beneath the Sink is about a girl named Kat who is moving into a new house in a new neighborhood with her family, and she very quickly finds a sponge under the sink. Now, she and her brother kind of fight over this after a while, but eventually, as the story progresses on, Daniel's friend, her brother, uh, finds out in a encyclopedia that this monster is called the Gruel, and this Gruel can do really bad stuff to you. If you get rid of it, you can die. So, yeah. The whole premise of the book is basically about, like I said, the sponge, and the way that you kind of, I guess, destroy it and stop it in its paths is by, I guess, projecting good light on it. This thing causes a lot of evil, but when it has peace on it, or you express peace to it, it then starts to kind of go away and isn't effective anymore. So yeah. Now, the episode is very similar, though very compressed at the same time. It has the basic rundown of the plot, though few things are changed. Like, I'm pretty sure, if I can't remember correctly, I think the encyclopedia is not in this one. That whole part of the book is cut out, but for the most part, it's the same. It's just run down quicker, and a couple more events happen that are just really subtle. Now, I guess I can go into thoughts if that's all right. Um, okay, so It Came From Beneath the Sink's book. Let's start with that one. Is an interesting one. Now, if you haven't seen my OG62 ranking video, I'll give the basic rundown of my thoughts. Now, this is easily one of the, in my opinion, weakest Goosebumps books, story-wise. I don't find much threat in the Gruel, although he does have quite a bit of threat in himself. If I was in the place of Kat or Daniel or any of the characters in this book, I'd probably just pass it off and say, that can't be real. I don't think that anything in this book really feels that dangerous if you were a normal person in a normal world. I just can't see it. Now, if you knew for a fact that this thing, just like the reader does, if you knew for a fact that this thing was very threatening and it can hurt you, in that way, I can see some people liking it. For me, though, I try to put myself inside the shoes of some of these Goosebumps characters, and this one I cannot. So there's that. They kind of just believe anything, even if they are correct. Uh, as for the characters, I don't like them very much, if I'm being honest. I never. Daniel and his friend are extremely annoying from what I can remember. And Kat herself is all right, but extremely juvenile. It's kind of your casual Goosebumps character, except really one of those forgettable ones, in my opinion. Besides that, I do like the climax. The ending is interesting. And although I don't love this book, as we will talk about later on, this created a lot of way better stories. I think we can all agree on that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the book.
I mean, I think you have valid points, and I'll definitely touch on them when I speak on my thoughts. But I want to pass it over to Alejandro real quick. What are your thoughts on It Came From Beneath the Sink, Alex?
Well, book wise, I think that in comparison to the episode's probably gonna be better than this, but I still think this was a good starting ground. And there's some stuff I like about this actually more than the episode. I think the characters are sadly kind of forgettable. They aren't bad, but they're not necessarily like great or anything. They don't have anything unique about them. It's just the iconic brother teasing sister or sister teasing brother type stuff. They're just playing jokes on each other. Forgettable parent characters who are also pretty annoying at times. And I think the concept of the book is actually pretty good. I like all the things the Gruul does, and there's even a moment in the book where the Gruul seems like it's dead, but it actually is playing dead, which I think is a really unique mechanic that it can do, where it can shrink down and stop breathing and stuff, basically holding its breath. And yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff the Gruul can do. I think it's definitely a threatening villain if you weren't aware of what the Gruul, uh, how the Gruul can die. And I think the ending of the book, or rather the entire climax, is actually pretty solid and fast paced. Let alone the whole book, I actually think was pretty fast. It flew by in less than like an hour and a half. And yeah, the climax itself is probably the better part of the book. Obviously, it's when stuff starts happening, involving a scene at the playground, which was pretty interesting. The Gruul is causing shenanigans and is very, very threatening until you find out the weakness. And when it comes down to the weakness, I think it's actually kind of funny, of course, which was the goal, obviously, that the one thing that killed the Gruul is literal kindness. It's kind of funny. And it kind of also shines light on the idea of Goosebumps being both funny and scary. So I thought that was kind of cool. And the twist, um, yeah, I like that in the episode more, even if they are the same. I think the episode just did it a little better. And yeah, the book gets a solid like maybe 6.5 to 7 out of 10. It's not very memorable, but it's not terrible or bad even. Definitely had an interesting villain though. That's my main positive.
I mean, yeah, I think both of y'all definitely echo a lot of things I feel, and I'll get into my thoughts real quick before we read aloud BD's and Spongy's thoughts. For me, I see this book being overhated in the community, and I think we can all agree it's nowhere near a bad book. People saying that this book is bad, I think, are probably coming from a place where they think that a killer sponge is too goofy and too out there for Goosebumps. But this is strangely one of those times where I think that Stein was trying to be somewhat creative with the concept, and I can appreciate having a killer sponge idea because sponges are just the most superfluous item in a kitchen sink, and Stein managed to turn that into a monster. And by actually giving it some sort of attitude and threat, I don't really feel like the story does the best job at characterizing or making the Gruul a character. Maybe as good, or I want to say good, or maybe as to the level that the episode did with the monster. But what I do love about the story is that it has some very metal moments in terms of the bad luck curse that the Gruul puts on the family. This book is not afraid to shed some blood. You actually see some bloodshed in this book, not in the way that you would think, though, in like a slasher movie or a traditional horror movie. You get it where, like, the father in the ladder scene, he cuts himself open. You see some blood. There's a knife scene where I think it might be this book and another book we're going to talk about, where there's something that happens to somebody's hand that's pretty gnarly. There's a biking scene where the main character, Kat, I think that's her name, has a grisly bike accident, and it's pretty graphic. The book is not afraid to mess up some kids. I mean, it's not afraid, and for that, I ironically say that the Gruul is one of the more intimidating Goosebumps villains. The book, where I think it shines, is its charm. I think it's very charming. I think y'all are onto something here. The characters though aren't that memorable. The monologue in the book isn't that good. There are some parts of the plot that feel kind of silly and juvenile, but I think Stein was trying to do that to add some levity to the story to kind of counterbalance its darker moments. So it is one of the more balanced Goosebumps books and kind of synonymous with the, like Alex said, goofy but scary thing that Goosebumps is known for. It's kind of like the poster child for that. The episode, I feel, goes way more into the goofier side of things. I feel like the Gruul's design is just really dumb. Like, it's not exactly how I would picture it in the book, except here they literally took a kitchen sponge and put very faint red eyes and stupid looking teeth. And yeah, there are some parts of the story that get mulled over because of, the 22-minute time crunch. And the climax is actually more sillier than what the book is, in my opinion. And I think that kind of takes away from it. But I do think that the stinger ending of the episode is probably one of the more iconic endings of the entire show. So I do think it has that going for it. All in all, I think the episode is a downgrade compared to the book. Some people might say by significant margin, like myself, but some people might say it's kind of close. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. Unless we have anything else to add, let's go ahead and read what Spongy and BD have to say about the book and episode.
Before I get into that really quick, I'd also like to say that this obviously is a very popular book amongst kids in the 90s as well, because first of all, if Stein was getting away with doing, like you said, kind of these gnarly scenes and, having death is a pretty big topic in the book, of course, having a sponge is going to kind of level out, like, what they were trying to do. I think that was on purpose, and the last thing is, it also is apparent to me that it is easily, out of any Goosebumps mascot, although it's not like a very like humanoid one, it is easily the one that pops up on merch the most. I mean, here's just an example, and this is just sitting right by me. You see the book? It's got the eyes. On this lunchbox alone, there's 3. So if that can be 3 times on one lunchbox, guys, you can tell people liked it. That's what I'm trying to say. All right, let's see what BD and Spongy said. Okay. All right. BD says that Beneath the Sink's book. This is a fun one, but don't remember too much, to be honest. The Gruul is a fun, goofy, villain, and is quite threatening with its powers basically injuring anybody, making people disappear, and killing off plant life. The story got actually intense at points with trying to destroy it, and I enjoyed the weird creatures encyclopedia in the book which they used, reminding me of that scene from Haunting Our Walls where they used this exact same book, LMAO. The book gets like a 7.6 out of 10. Very exact rating. For the episode, he says, this episode is fine, mostly funny. The scene of the main character getting Looney Tunes launched down a hill off her bike made me spit take. The Gruul looks fun in the episode for how out of place it looks in every scene, and I will say the internal monologue from the main character could have been taken out. The breaking into the school scene was fine, I guess, too. Didn't care much for the added climax. Episode gets a 7.2 out of 10. See what Spongy had to say.
One thing before we get to Spongy, I forgot to mention that Catherine Isabel plays Kat in the episode, and she's a rather famous actress or Canadian actress. She played in movies like Ginger Snaps and Freddy vs. Jason. She was
Wow.
in that movie with a bunch of alum, like Evan Ross and Grady from Fever Swamp. They were all in Freddy vs. Jason together, which is kind of fun. So yeah, Catherine Isabel is kind of like a semi-famous horror actress that's in this episode. But yeah, go ahead and continue with Spongy.
Well, yeah, that's really cool. What Spongy has to say. It came from Beneath the Sink, the book. Leave it to Stein to take a goofy idea and make it work. Gruel is a cool idea with it being a bad luck thing that leads to some dark bits. There's some gore here that is neat to see. I like the lore aspect in how they just can't get rid of it. On the flip side, the pacing and structure can be wonky at times. I agree there. Feels like it doesn't always know where to go until the climax. The way it's defeated is amusing and the twist is so dumb it's great. A flawed story but has enough violence and decent ideas to make it fairly good. And on the episode, he says Dan Angel might may dislike it, but I don't. It has less of the gore, which makes the gruel a weaker threat, so I can get that that doesn't make it what? What? I think he made a typo here, I don't know. But the plot doesn't feel tighter and takes more advantage of the losing the gruel part, leading to a better climax. So there is a give and take, but it is still fairly good. If certainly cheesy. Great
I mean,
points.
Spongy does have a point where the episode does play more onto the lore aspect that the book had, and kind of like focused in on like the fact, like he brought up, them losing it and the consequences of that is definitely more on display in the episode than the book was. And like I said, I do think that some people can appreciate the climax more, I guess, but I just thought it was sillier, and it kind of takes me out of it a little bit. Um, but that kind of
Yeah.
leads us. You want to add on something, Bruce?
Well, talking about the episode, since we actually didn't do that yet, besides completionists in them, I feel like it is definitely toning up the goofiness, which is extremely unnecessary for a book that already has a fair bit of it. The entire climax is kind of questionable.
Yeah, and you know, it comes down for me. It's not really the acting performances in the episode or anything. It really comes down to the tone of the story, and I think that's what kind of loses me in the episode. When you have too much of something that is tongue in cheek, like humor and goofiness, it kind of clouds what you're going for, even though it can be considered more streamlined. To me, this episode is kind of one of those textbook examples that gave Goosebumps that reputation of being just some goofy, oddball type of, product. Which, in a lot of times, if you compare this episode to other season one episodes, they're not this goofy. They're actually rather dark and kind of serious toned. This one is just more just goofy from the beginning, and you cut out the dark suspenseful things that the book had, like the gore and a bit of the stakes. So, in my opinion, I think it's a downgrade. But judging by everybody's consensus, it seems to be that everybody seems to be mostly on board with the book being better. I mean, I think Alex might be the only one.
Um, I have to disagree there actually. Now, I wouldn't say it's much better at all. Probably like point 0.5, because I round 0.5s if anyone didn't know. Probably like a 0.5% better, out of 10, I mean. And it's mainly just for the fact that, and I feel like I'm the only person that really goes through this, but the book just kind of drags for me. I don't know if that's just me, but so I'm the only person that has that issue. While the episode basically just gets it faster. And I feel like, if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. I've seen that in so many uh, book verse TV episode examples. Like Calling All Creeps is one that very beloved book, just like this one actually. That being more loved. And I think that although I do like the book a fair bit, it's like having like 60 pages of just a kid being bullied. It's like, okay, we get it, while the episode just kind of picks it up. And I feel like that's a great case of that. I don't know. Alex, you got anything to add there? No?
Okay, so I think we're gonna roll with for Sync's representation in this. The book is this sort of considered superior version here, which
Yeah.
leads us into our second book, which this is actually not the second time. This was actually the third time the Sync formula was used because our third example was actually the second time. But this came from Nightmare Room, and this book saw an episode adaptation in the TV show, and it's called Locker 13. Now, Nightmare Room, in case y'all don't know about this, Nightmare Room is a very, I guess, undercovered, kind of overlooked R.L. Stine sister series that he intended to kind of be coinciding with Goosebumps Gold at HarperCollins. But since Goosebumps Gold got held back because of copyright with Scholastic, he just made this series. And in a lot of ways, the Nightmare Room felt like the spiritual successor to Goosebumps in the early 2000s. And Locker 13 was a very early book in the series, and it's about a kid. I think he's like 13, maybe 14 in the story. His name is Luke, and he's like a wrestling kid, or maybe I think he's basketball in the book. He's wrestling in the episode, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. He's very superstitious. He's like into good luck, collecting good luck charms. He's kind of like the kid from the Luck of the Irish movie from Disney Channel. Have you ever seen that? Where he's just, all about holding on to this charm and all that, his charms. And he gets randomly assigned to a new locker once he has a confusion with his locker in the beginning of the school year. So he ends up getting transferred to this part of the school that nobody goes to. And it's this very old locker with the number 13 on it. And he finds this like unopened toy thing that ends up being like a charm that grants him some abilities that he's not used to, but this charm may or may not be actually planted by somebody that he trusted in the story, and there might be a price to pay with all this good luck that he's been getting. And he learns the grisly truths and exactly who or what might be behind this charm and what that entails for the story. And it has some pretty dark moments in it. Locker 13's book, in my opinion, is kind of like the crescendo of the Sync formula. If we're talking about all three books here, it's definitely the most darkest toned story out of the bunch. Um, it has a lot more character development with the main character than the other books do. I think Luke is by far is the most memorable protagonist out of all three that we're going to talk about. Luke is actually a pretty good protagonist, and he goes through some choices in the story that are very thought provoking and kind of makes you question what you would do in a similar situation. And he's very relatable in a sense that despite he's kind of like on the neurotic side, like a Mark from Shrunken Head or somebody that just is constantly repeating things that they're into. In the case for Luke here, I do think he's like on the better end of that kind of typecast character. There's some solid moments in the story. It's been a while since I read it, but I do clearly remember a scene with, I think, a being called the Fate Master that scared the crap out of me, where he appears out of the locker. And this, the way that character is written, is very eerie. A lot of positives to say about it. Just a very well written book. And I guess I'll get into the episode. I guess my thoughts here before I pass it over. The episode is definitely something when you're comparing Locker 13's episode to the book. It's almost a completely different take on the story. You have so many different change ups here. Now, I will say this up front. Luke is definitely way more neurotic in the episode. He is heightened up about luck. I mean, the guy has luck posters in his room, for God's sake. It's just so overblown. I feel like the neuroticism in the episode kind of gets in the way of liking Luke. There's a lot of crappy acting, particularly from the science teacher, and some really bizarre changes to the story that just did not need to be there. Like making him a wrestler and then having this weird plot dealing with the Fate Master, who is played by Angus Grimm, who played the villain in the Phantasm movies. Of all people, the Phantasm villain is the Fate Master in this episode, and they kind of waste him too. You had the dad from Kenan and Kel playing the wrestling coach. A lot of fun cameos and stuff, but the story here just feels very bizarre. I mean, and the editing to this episode has to be some of the worst editing I've seen in a kids horror episode. Period. I can vent on, but some people will say that this is a pretty genuinely terrible episode. And in terms of this show, the Nightmare Room show, I know this is kind of new territory for y'all. Y'all haven't seen much. This is easily in the bottom three of that old show. Um, so I'm going to pass it over to Alex real quick to get his thoughts about Locker 13. Alex, what did you think about Locker 13?
Well, for the book, I'd say it's actually quite good, and I was actually surprised because this was the one I was least excited to read or reread. Like, it came from Beneath the Sink. And for my first Nightmare Room related read, I was actually quite surprised. I think I'll definitely go read more just because of this. The book was very good, surprisingly. It got a side character that was not actually in the episode, or at least the gender was changed.
Oh,
Which
yeah,
is
that too. Okay, go on. I forgot about that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. I liked this book more, I'd say, before we get into my thoughts on the episode. Mostly because that character, I actually thought the whole thing going on with them losing their luck charm, which was the little school, I think, necklace or something, or keychain. I thought that was way more interesting than what we got in the episode, where it just appears in like a toy store esque little packaging. It's really strange. Yeah, I liked it more in this episode. Sorry, the book. And I think the character, he's definitely more toned down on his luck based stuff, his obsessions. He's definitely more likable. He has a lot of monologuing in the first chapter. I thought that was pretty good, explaining all the luck stuff that he's into. Kind of, makes you like the character more in the book, understands him more. He's very superstitious and stuff, instead of just obsessed like he is in the episode. The whole Fate Master stuff, when it gets into that later in the book, I think that was fantastic. I like his design more in the book, even if you literally can't see it. It's definitely describes better than what we got in the live action adaptation. Um, it's definitely way more threatening, or scary than just a guy in a locker with a dark robe. It kind of like just pops up in the book, and there's also a creepy scene involving maggots with him. Very eerie. Uh, the whole basketball plot where he wants to get better at basketball and beat this kid, thought that was pretty good. Even if that kid didn't involve in some pretty really scenes where he beats the living crap out of him. Yeah, I think the luck stuff that does happen in this book, there's actually a bit more of it. But that's true. I think it's a little bit better, like finding the cat, I think, in the bush. I think the ending of the book is actually a bit of a downgrade from the episode, even if it is very happy. But the climax overall for the book is better than the episode, involving the pool scene, which I thought was fantastic. Overall, the book gets like a very strong 8.5 or maybe 9 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed it, surprisingly. Now, the episode, at first I liked it, but thinking about it the same night, I was kind of left there like, okay, yeah, there's some changes from the book I don't like, at least in comparison to the book. Now, one of the whole characters and their whole thing with the luck charms completely cut out, and their gender was kind of changed, and they're a completely new person that wasn't even in the book, I don't think, which is very strange. There's also the side antagonist of the bully kid. He like gets no screen time at all, and he has a really weird scene in the beginning of the episode. I commented about that on Discord. It looked very interesting. Kind of something that would be in my nightmares. Yeah, it's got some stuff that I like about it more than the book. The ending I think is more open-ended and interesting because, sure, the Fate Master is kind of defeated, but is he really? Because you're kind of giving it off to another person. Um, it's very left open-ended. I like that a bit more. I don't think the acting in the episode was that bad. I don't really see that argument, in my opinion. Well, I might just be stupid. I don't watch movies all the time, surprisingly, for how big. Yeah, I did like the episode. However, I don't think it was terrible. But the acting, it was good. But I think the characters in the book betrayed better. Definitely more toned down on the luck stuff, of course. The plot wasn't just, oh, I found this in my locker. Um, yeah, the book's definitely a bit better. Uh, Yeah. The climax is also very weak in the episode. It just kind of happens with the wrestling scene, which is also a weird change because it's just like, what? Yeah, the book, way more scarier scenes, way better betrayed characters, way more interesting, and much better climax overall. The episode had a better ending. That's about it. Yeah, the book's better for sure there.
One
And
thing I think the episode did better in terms of scares is the bathroom scene in the episode where they had the Nightmare on Elm Street effect, where in that first movie where Freddy's coming through the ceiling, they did that same thing with the Fate Master coming through the bathroom wall. If I would have saw that as a kid, that would have traumatized me if I saw something like that on television, even those old school TVs. So props to the show for making something that kind of haunting to in a kids show. That was probably the scariest moment of the entire episode, and I will give its roses for that. So yeah, Bruce, you have anything you want to add on about the story?
So, you guys kind of stole my thunder, but I will kind of elaborate on my thoughts a little bit more. So, and also it's kind of hard to compare, but this has to easily be one of my all-time favorite, I guess, concepts in kids horror. I mean, hands down, I'm so impressed with like this story and this plot. I love it. I don't know what it is. It's so eerie and just creepy. Um, although I guess kind of comparing it back to Sync, where you kind of find something and it's kind of just like, whatever at first, and then it gets scarier on. You see this and you're already like, I don't like the feeling of this. And here's the thing, I actually had this happen in real life. I'm not even kidding. It was nearly exactly the same, besides the whole haunted part. But basically, in seventh grade, I was assigned a locker that was in the weirdest part of the school where there were no classrooms and no one else had a locker in this hallway, and it literally just led out to this one exit that was like never used. It was the creepiest thing ever. And it was like it felt older than the rest of them, like it was a darker red than the other lockers. It kind of creeped me out every day, and we had to put our stuff in there. It was this weird rule we had in our middle school a few years back, but wow, rereading that again brought back memories. Besides that, I really like the characters. I'll be honest, I actually do. I think they're a lot better here than the episode. I think we can all agree on that. Another thing that I just love about this book, if I'm being honest, sorry, something if that I just kind of hate about this book, though, is that I feel like it just feels long at times. There's a movie that I don't know if I've ever compared books to this before, but Monty Python and the Holy Grail, classic film. I'd actually say in regards to this too, I actually think this is really good. This should be considered a classic in Stein territory. Uh, and I feel like it's really great in that like first half, and then although it's still good from then on out, I feel like it's just like kind of in that like third, 3/5 in, or like maybe even a little bit into 4/5 in. It's just like it kind of feels long and kind of overused in my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has that issue, but that's just me. Besides that, I really like it. I don't know what I would give this book. Probably like a 7.5 out of 10. I decently enjoyed it. This was actually my first Nightmare Room book that I've read so far. So, yeah, very good first impression. I'm excited to read more of these. I think this was the second book too, so I guess it shows that these earlier books in these R.L. Stein series is kind of, I guess, outweigh the others in some ways. So yeah.
What about the episode? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the book uses everything to its advantage for the most part. I think the episode does the exact opposite, and I feel like it's overhated. I don't see some of the issues. Kind of like Alex said, I don't know why people say the acting is so bad. I thought it was just okay. Um, Besides that, there's just random things they change in the plot that are so like just so unnecessary. Um, like you guys kind of brought up, and it's just weird. Um, I don't have too much more to add because I already forgot a fair deal of this episode somehow. But I mean, I guess it's been a couple weeks. But another thing I noticed was when I was middle of the episode, and you said that the guy from Phantasm was in here. I'm like, what? And then I'm like, no way. Because here's the thing, in the Phantasm, not to go off into a tangent, but I think that his character makes those movies good. I mean, I've seen only the first two, but I feel like Phantasm's franchise is like all right, but you add that villain in there, and I feel like it's a lot better. And in this episode, he just does nothing. I mean, it's not the actor's fault. Of course, it's the script given, whatever. Wasn't Dan Angel attached to this,
I
right?
think Dan Angel and Billy Brown. I don't know who wrote. I'm trying to remember who wrote the script. I don't think it was them personally. I don't think it was them, but it was definitely one of the regular show writers. And I think his last name begins with R, but I forget his name. So
Well,
that's where
yeah.
we're at. Yeah.
But basically, whoever that was had more decision than he did, obviously. But it's just sad to see like a cool kind of connection, and you can't really use it to the book's advantage, or sorry, the episode's advantage. Kind of like you can with, I guess a good example of it is like Are You Afraid of the Dark's Vampire Town versus Old Story. I feel like the kid in those episodes, he's great in both of them. And when you think about it, you're like, wow, it's really cool that you have this and this. Same with like Catherine Long in Tale of the Walking Shadow, I think it was called. Really cool to have stuff like that. Although it's a bit different from those two examples, I feel like this kind of does the same thing for me, although doesn't succeed at it. The episode in general, not great. It was one of the most, I guess we could call it, I don't want to overuse this term, but mid things I have ever seen in kids horror, which is hilarious because the concept just doesn't even feel the same. I mean, unless I'm missing something. If I'm being honest, I kind of went on my phone for a little bit of it, but it's kind of a boring episode. To add one more thing, I actually forgot. Yes, the editing is some of the worst I have ever seen in movies, like cinema in general. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, and I mentioned this in my review of it. I definitely think it's one of the most forgettable episodes I've ever watched in any IP. The only thing I can remember really is like certain scenes and maybe the ending with the frog dissection stuff. That was really weird, but it had some setup and payoff at least. But for me, like if you can't, I think the biggest sin if it's not like some overacting, and yes, I'm saying some overacting. I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad, but like the science teacher, for example, is so painfully overacting that it kind of takes me out of whatever scene she's in. But then you had these very choppy scene transitions throughout the entire episode where you literally go from one place to the next without any proper segue. And it feels like the pace of the episode is just all over the place. It's scatterbrained. And it just makes it not even fun to sit down and watch it because of that. Um, so yeah, I could definitely see the point that you brought up about the pace because the pace in the editing is atrocious, and I definitely agree with that. Let's bring up Spongy's points, and then we'll bring up BD's.
All right, let's see. Discord's kind of being bad right now. Okay. All right. So this is oh, where is it? Okay, this is BD's thoughts. So for the book, this book was above average. Feels like a better version of Be Careful What You Wish For. I didn't bring that up, but I actually have to agree there, like quite a bit. With the basketball stuff mixed with cursed object as the main plot instead. Overall, story to me was fun enough, but these cursed object stories always end up being the same stuff to me with the tropes. Yup. The main villain was threatening with the controlling weather aspects and powers. However, the aesthetic reminded me of a better version of the Dark Granny from Ghost Next Door. So, not necessarily a bad thing, I guess, but the book gets a 7.5 out of 10. I can see that.
I like the Dark Danny from Ghost Next Door comparison because the Fate Master there's not a lot explained about who he is. I mean, he's just like this omnipresent being, kind of like how Dark Danny was. But in Ghost Next Door, there's like some reveal to add some weight to a character in the story. As in, Fate Master kind of feels like that threatening Dark Danny, because Dark Danny never really was threatening in Ghost Next Door all that much. So yeah, I can see that point. And also making it sound like, this is like, if you took "Be Careful What You Wish For" and it came from deep from beneath the sink and put it into a blender, that comparison is also valid for the book. Um, what does he say
Yeah.
about what does he say about the episode?
Oh boy. Episode has awful jump cuts, terrible acting, toned down villain, awful pacing. Shit sucks from the Tiana Trump on an OnlyFans bonus. This episode is straight doo-doo garbaggio, registered stink offender and graduate of a master's degree in stinkology. This episode makes onions cry and makes Steven wonder why it's so ass and listen to it on 2 times speed. Stein says he would rather fight off every magical sorcerer crackhead from the New York subway than ever rewatch this deep fried rat tail. Whoever is reading ordered nachos with nacho cheese when they went to a private screening of Shingles in 4D. Hope those sloppy scene smells were worth $19.99 and a watered down Coke. Episode gets 3 out of 10. And that's a fair comparison, man. I mean, although you could deal without the casual beady over dramaticness, in my opinion, I actually see what he's going for here.
Yeah, BD like thinks it's just hot garbaggio. It's kind of trash in its production value. I will say this. It has its moments. It has its moments like the bathroom scene and stuff, and maybe Angus Grimm being in the episode was kind of the highlight. But its editing truly is an abomination to be had on the eyes. So let's see what
Really is.
Spongy has to say.
All right, the book. This one is pretty good. Luke is a pretty likable lead, I agree, as he is worried about Hannah when her luck gets much worse while his improves. He even gets a chance. He even has a chance to give her the charm back, and while he doesn't take it, he feels totally guilty about it and keeps wondering if that was the right move. The mortality play makes it more interesting than most. Fate Master is a cool idea, and there are some messed up things done with the bad luck. There's also a surprising and decent message about getting ahead through hard work and skill rather than relying on luck. I never noticed that. That's a good message. And there's a sort of redemption for the bully, which is refreshing. On the flip side, the way Fate Master works is wonky at times and can get repetitive, I agree. Especially later on. While it has some damaging issues, it has enough good luck to override the bad luck. Yeah.
Yeah, its message is that there's actually like some sort of substance to be had with Locker 13 story compared to the rest. I will also say that. I can't believe we haven't brought it up. Spongy was hit the nail on the head. Luke's arc has a distinguished character arc in the story, at least in the book, kind of in the episode too, but more so pronounced in the book, where you see him kind of learning that good luck and having good luck doesn't mean anything if you have the right skill and the know-how. That matters more, and I think that message is a good message to send, especially to kids reading out there. So yeah, Spongy makes great points on the book. What did he say about the episode though?
Alright, so for the episode, he says, it's mostly fine. It streamlines some things okay, and Fate Master feels more proactive at times. But in place of Hannah, we get this annoying Jeff guy, and the morality part does not hit as well. Plus, the bully, played by Marco in Animorphs, oh, interesting, is now just whatever. The new solution is okay, but doesn't quite work as well. Overall, it's generally decent and the streamline works, but the odd detail changes make it so it does feel like a flawed downgrade. But good, but not hugely so. Sorry for butchering that. I'm tired.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're kind of all over the place in thoughts on Locker 13's episode, but do you think we can all come to a consensus that the book kind of wins here? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think the book wins for Locker 13.
all
Uh,
of us. Yeah.
so we have Sync's book, Locker 13's book, and then the final one to talk about is Ghosts of Fear Street. Now, this book is actually ghost written. This was the only Sync formula book not written by R.L. Stein. This one was written by a person. Hold on, I think it says it in the copyright page. Let me see what it says. Elizabeth Winfrey. Elizabeth Winfrey, who was a ghost writer. I think she wrote a couple books in the Ghost of Fear Street series. She wrote this little thing called The Tale of the Blue Monkey, which came out very late in the series. It came out when Gold Key had acquired the Ghost of Fear Street IP. I have here a hardcover edition where you don't see the ad that was here in the circle. But this story, I think BD brought it up. Definitely is more of a play on a famous Stephen King short story called The Monkey, which is also a superstition story that was featured, I think, in Skeleton Crew, one of his adult horror anthology horror collections. And for a kid's version of that, kind of using the setup of the monkey, which is quite literally a clacking toy monkey that we see in the book here, infusing that with it came from beneath the sink formula, I think brought a serviceable story here. And the story takes place on Fear Street in the Fear Street universe. So the story involves two siblings, Amanda and Danny. They have this babysitter who tells them this legend of this toy maker that lived across the street from them that made this toy that might have been responsible for a tragic accident on the land that they currently live on. And throughout the story, they start to kind of buy into this legend as they start to look over to where the toy maker's house would have been. They see this mysterious man coming around their yard with a shovel and giving ominous warnings and kind of threatening stares to them. And they get the impulse to go over to the toy maker's house and investigate, and they end up finding a toy that resembles the legend. Now once the kids get the toy, bad things start happening in the typical it came from beneath the sink or Locker 13 fashion. And there's a couple of scenes in here that I think are pretty dark, even though some of them feel kind of rehashy to it came from beneath the sink just a little bit. Some of these scenes are quite enthralling. I think my favorite one was the shell shock scene where she sees the blue monkey in the bathroom. I don't know if this is kind of a fake out scene, but the way it's written is just so well done and effective that it kind of legitimately gets to me on a psychological level. Um, and the blue monkey is yet again another cursed object vehicle to inflict some chaos. However, there's more to this book than the other ones in the past because there's actually some plot twists and a mystery going on, like a whodunit kind of thrown in there, which I thought was really refreshing for the formula. And we get a recontextualization on a character throughout the story that might be the real villain, who is actually the hero, and what's been going on with this the whole time. In my opinion, I think the Tale of the Blue Monkey is probably the most refreshing out of the three we're going to talk about. However, I will say this about the Tale of the Blue Monkey. It does have its moments, I think, in the first part of the story where, in my opinion, it's a little repetitive. I think some of us will agree on this. It just feels like there's too much setup going on and a little too much fake outs going on in that first half before it kicks on and makes a really fun and honestly almost god tier second half. Like this, we're talking like Curse of the Mummy's Tomb second half or Night of the Living Dummy 1 second half, where the second half really makes up for the kind of lackluster first half at times. Um, and honestly, I think out of all the villain concepts, like the Gruul, the Bad Luck Charm slash the Fate Master, and the Blue Monkey is the one I think about the most when I think about these books. He's easily the most memorable icon that we can discuss because all of these stories, minus Fate Master, I guess in a way, are more item focused, villains. They're not really things that have personalities, and they're not really things that you can offer some character analysis on. But just the sheer presence of the Blue Monkey in the story, I think, got to me the most, which is something I could tip my hat to it. The characters, though, are getting back into that forgettable territory, and I think the pace could have been a little bit better. There are some scenes where we get some weird, we're leaving the house, we're going back to the house, and just repetitive stuff like that in the back half, too, thinking about it, that gets kind of annoying. But overall, very solid book. I think it's a super solid one. Definitely slept on, and I quite enjoy this. Bruce, let's start with you. What is your thoughts about the Tale of the Blue Monkey?
Man, did I really like this one. So, to start off, I know this doesn't have too much to do with the book, but I have to say that this thing, and I know this is kind of a bias, but it doesn't affect my rating too much. It brings a lot of like childhood memories back from when I was really young, like 5, 6, 7. With some of the atmosphere you see and like this kind of urban legend stuff. I love that. It's just a weird feeling that I really like. Now, for the rest of the book, though, for the actual story, plot, everything, I will say this: Completionist is gonna like drop his jaw and throw up his hands in a second here. But the first half of this book, it low key reminds me of Legend of the Lost Legend. Although better, I will say that it is miles better. What I feel like it's just mainly the whole finding this monkey thing, kind of finding this chest, same ish thing. But once again, this is a lot less massive of a plot, I guess, and it also, unlike that book, actually makes sense in this book. Um, though still not bad. I think it is kind of okay-ish. I would not say the first half is very good. Like you said, it kind of gets repetitive at times, but as soon as that second half comes rolling in, it is a ripper. It I went through that in probably what, an hour at most, and I think this is actually a longer book from what I can remember. I'm not sure. Um I remember this like second half just being fantastic. I really like it. You know, it almost reminds me in some ways, I'm not saying all, but it almost reminds me of like Night of the Living Dummy 1, but just way better. I feel like, I don't know, with the whole like discovering this dummy in this weird part of the house, or with Dummy's case, I guess a dumpster. But both somewhat similar in my opinion. Add that better Legend of the Lost Legend part. I think it adds for an interesting plot. Just like what we've been talking about, add It Came From Beneath the Sink. I really like this book. I really like how I'm not gonna say ambitious, I guess, but I'm gonna say ambitious. I feel like this book is kind of ambitious for what it all tried to do. I feel like it tries to do a lot of things at once and surprisingly succeeds at all of them. So there's my opinions. I really like this book. And as for the rest of the Ghost of Fear Street series, I know these are all ghost written. Well, kinda, since the author's name is just in the front. But um, I think that this is definitely, for my first Ghost of Fear Street, definitely one that makes me want to look forward to reading these other ones. Plus, I own quite a few, actually. So, pretty awesome. I
So
really
for
liked it.
you, so for you, do you think Elizabeth Winfrey delivered a better sync type of story than Stein did in both of his books that he definitely did right? Okay, okay, that'll be interesting to talk about later on. Um, I guess we'll get into Alex's thoughts about the Tale of the Blue Monkey. Alex, what did you think about this book?
Well, like you said, this first half is definitely weaker. And I'd say I actually didn't really enjoy it, like, basically at all. There's Wonder Woman in there, involving someone in the window, which I thought was actually pretty scary, like Fear Street level scary. And then it, turned out to be a fake out, which kind of ruined it, kind of not, because it was still kind of eerie. But besides that moment, the first half was pretty. Did get that little backstory segment, but still, besides those little details, first half just a bunch of fake outs. The Blue Monkey wasn't actually alive or anything, cursed at the moment, doing stuff to the kids, which was kind of bad in my opinion. Oh, But of course, we kind of transition into the other half of the book when a certain character does something that kind of unsparks the Blue Monkey doing stuff and causing bad things to happen, just like the Gruel. And I actually saw this coming immediately because when they were explaining how the Blue Monkey works, it was pretty obvious what they were doing. I wasn't expecting the major twist that did come with them later in the book, but I did see their intentions at least. But yeah, things pick up like right after the barbecue scene because that scene was actually really good, probably one of the best scenes in the entire
Yeah, the
book.
barbecue scene was. I forgot to mention that, but that's yeah, top notch kids horror right there.
Oh yeah. Right after that, the book picks up a lot. There's a lot of great and scary things that the monkey does to these kids and their family, and it's quite interesting at times. There's also, of course, the plot where they're sneaking over to the neighbor's house next door, sorry, in front of them, trying to see if the dad over there, or husband, I don't know who it was. I think there's a married couple there who, yeah, to see if he's the toy maker. Turns out that may or may not be true. Probably not. And it turns out the toy maker is quite a shocker, actually. I did not see this one coming, even if I did kind of hint at it earlier. There's also an intense scene where a character's trying to break into their house. I thought that was actually quite scary. Even them banging on the door. It felt like something more realistic, too. Not knowing the context, imagine that. That would actually be pretty terrifying. And when they do find out who this toy maker may or may not be, the book is just really dang good from there. We got this great twist as well at the end, where they kind of beat the toy maker at their own game, and may or may not put the curse on them. And yeah, it's a great happy ending. I'm glad the book let off there, didn't have some sort of stupid twist, kind of like Revenge of the Lawn Gnomes, which I would have not been surprised if it was literally just they took the final like paragraph in that book and changed it up a tiny bit so the gorilla winks at him or something. So yeah, anyways, I really liked that. I thought it was a really, really solid story. Better than Sync. Well, we'll get to that soon, but it's kind of debatable for me where I'm going to put this. So lots of these can be 50-50s. But yeah, very solid read.
Yeah, and something else I want to mention, like when especially when I think we're going to get down to the comparison of all three, I do feel like this one so far that we've hinted definitely has more differences in its concept than the other two do. As in, like, Sync and Blocker 13 are kind of playing on the same plot line for the most part in the same similar or general concept, except Blocker 13 has more thematic choices there and more thematic messages than Sync does. But this one actually has plot structure elements of like whodunits and there's like a legitimate mystery and some urban legend stuff going on in the mix. So like this one definitely has the most shakeup. I think we've all kind of hinted at that. Definitely has the most shakeup of the three books. Um, so let's see what Spongy and Beatty has to say, and then we'll get into the face-off, I guess.
All right, so let's start with Spongy actually on this one. So he says that it's a mild good. I'm not crazy about the fake out with the brother doing some of it, and the thing with the neighbor doesn't add a whole lot. Doesn't go as far with the bad luck either. But the concept is solid, with it being stuck with them and how they get out of this. The reveal of the villain works, and I like that the Fury family is mentioned. Yeah, I actually do like that. Lesser than the other books here, but I do like it. Also, the Ghostwriter did Bone Chiller's Toilet Terror. She does a good job imitating Betsy Haynes and Stein. Well, that's pretty cool. I didn't know she did that. I actually own that book. Um, all right, I can agree with some of those points.
Yeah, the fake out stuff. I think we should just kind of like talk about this. Is the first half kind of leaning into that dummy formula a little bit, where it's
I,
all prank recontextualizations going on in the first half, basically, until
if
that second
anything,
half.
it reminds me more I feel like this was really just trying to be Night of the Living Dummy, but adding more to it, instead of just being a really basic plot. Although I think it really reminds me of Dummy 3. And it's one of the bigger issues. It's why I think it's a really mid opening, just like Dummy 3. I feel like that first half of Dummy 3, the first half of this book, I could do without it. I
Yeah, it's
feel
kind
like
of
it.
similar. They get the monkey relatively early on, but it's not alive until like halfway through the book.
It's just, yeah, Dummy 3. Although this is probably, I think I like this more because this actually does it for less time, while Dummy 3 does it for like what, 70 pages, dude. It's rough. So yeah, I think this is better, honestly, but I think that's what it reminds me of the most.
All right, what does BD have to say? And then we'll get into the face off.
The book was dark at a lot of points, and I enjoyed the homage paid to Stephen King's The Monkey short story from Skeleton Crew. Read it, it's awesome. The powers of the toy are pretty intimidating and again reach some dark points. The knife scene and grill. Yes.
The
Only
knife
com-
scene was amazing.
only complaints are the pacing kind of drags towards certain points, like when they got to the neighbor's house plus came back to their home and then went right back to the neighbor in back-to-back chapters. Lol. Also, I don't know. The story is a bit too simple at points and feels like it's missing that extra kick. Granted, the whodunit stuff was actually well done enough. Book gets a 7.5 out of 10. And I feel like I can agree with that, but I feel like he's a bit too harsh on some of these things where I feel like if you compare this, and I know comparing shouldn't be the only thing that factors into score, but I feel like if you compare this to some similar stories like I just kind of did, you can really see where uh this shines and those don't. In my opinion, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's kind of telling that BD gave basically a three-way tie on all three of these books. He gave it like the same score for all of them.
Oh
You
yeah.
notice that? Mine is Sync, but he did tell me which one he prefers, and he didn't. I don't know if he gave it the same score as Sync, um, or forgot to, but he told me which one he prefers. And I guess we'll start with BD on this because you're gonna be shocked. BD told me he thinks the book that wins out, because what we have left to talk about is Sync's book is definitely better than the episode. Blocker 13's book is definitely better than the episode. And when comparing Blue Monkey against them, he says that Blue Monkey wins. He thinks Blue Monkey is his favorite, which I was quite surprised since he gave Sync's book a slightly higher rating. But he definitely says out of all three, he prefers this one. And in a lot of ways, I can agree with that because, like I said, I brought it up about the plot structure. There's just more differences here than the other two to kind of separate them. But for me, in terms of what the story was able to deliver, in terms of scares, in terms of messages, thematic stuff, good character writing, just good writing all in general, I think Locker 13, the book, wins out for me on this one. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna pass it to Alex. Alex, out of all three, Locker 13's book, Sync's book, or Blue Monkey, which one do you think is the best?
Walker 13 episode. Yeah, definitely.
13's episode. Okay.
I'm joking. Anyways, um, it'd be easier if I do it from worst to best, kind of disqualifying easily, no doubt about it. The worst, still not terrible, but definitely the weakest of all of here. Walker 13's episode, I still liked it, but in comparison to the book, at least, it's definitely a big downgrade, and it removes some stuff I liked. Then I'd put, maybe it came from beneath the sink. Yeah, that book, it was still good. I liked the episode actually a little bit better. Um, Even in the climax too, which I think is weird. I actually really like the climax of the episode. Um, but the book itself, it's pretty good. It's got its moments, but it's not anything great or absolutely outstanding. But easily, going from there, Sing episode slightly better. I like the climax more. Um, then I'd put Blue Monkey. I think that one was still pretty dang good, and it's definitely basically came from Beneath the Sink and Locker 13, but with more plot to it. But easily Locker 13 is the most enjoyable read out of these. I think its climax is the absolute best part of any of these books. It beats them all, in my opinion. It's got the biggest threat of all of these. It's got a great villain. I like all his dialogue, all his scenes in the book. It's got good characters, surprisingly really good, and a great plot overall. So easily Locker 13's book.
Okay, so it looks like we're on the same page for our first time in a long time, Alex. All right, Locker 13's book. All right, Bruce, which one do you think wins out here?
Well, before I get into my thoughts, let's see what Spongy has to say.
Okay, we'll see what
And
Spongy has to say.
from what I can tell, he actually does not give uh any ratings, but I think from what I can remember, he definitely liked Locker 13's book the most. So interesting. So I guess that's gonna win, but I have to agree with BD on this one and say that me personally, Blue Monkey is my sort of jam. Um, though I can see why Locker 13 wins in this situation. Really great story, really great book. Um, I still think that there's just stuff I like about Blue Monkey more, just in general. But yeah.
And, just because Alex did this, clearly at the bottom for me, it's kind of like a dual tie between Sync's episode and Locker 13's episode. I really just don't care for those that much. Even though Sync's episode is definitely a little bit better, in my opinion. I think Locker 13's episode is the clear bottom, and then Sync's right above it. But for me, I think Sync's book would be like third place. But considerably speaking, comparing Blue Monkey to Sync, I think Blue Monkey is a whole step above Sync's book. But I also think that Locker 13's book is like a whole step above Blue Monkey, just in my personal opinion. And I think the differentiating factors is how well written the characters are in Locker 13 and how well the thematic messages are woven into the story. I think Stein's able to have more literary talent being shown in that story, and it's definitely one of Stein's strongest books he's written. Definitely like in his top 50 books I've read from him in terms of his writing abilities. It's just a well written book. It just it does kind of have some length issues, maybe some mild pacing things. The ending could be a little better in the book, but Blue Monkey is a fun story at least. And Blue Monkey, I can totally understand where y'all are coming from. It's easily the most fun one. It has the most unique plot. It has the most change up to the formula. And honestly, I'll totally be with you on this. The Blue Monkey villain is definitely way more memorable out of all three that we're talking about. And some of the concepts and scenes I think have stuck with me even better than Locker 13 stuff. So I'm giving a lot of praise to Blue Monkey here. All three of these books I think are really solid and kind of close to each other in a lot of regards. But it makes sense that Locker 13 wins out here in this situation, I feel. Does anybody else have anything you want to add before we close out?
I guess if you guys did this, I guess I'll just say that my ranking would probably be 13's episode at the bottom. Then I'm gonna say Sync's book, then Sync's episode, then Locker 13's book, then Blue Monkey. So, yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So yeah, that's our thoughts on It Came From Beneath the Sink versus Locker 13 versus The Tale of the Blue Monkey. Let us know down in the comments section if you've read these books before or watched these episodes. Which one's your favorite? Did you like this discussion that we had? Please, if you like this video, take the time to go sub up these guys, this whole panel. I'll put everybody's information down in the description and in the comment section of this video, including Ultimate Goosebumps Man, who could not make it tonight and didn't send us anything for the episode recording. So, just go sub him up too. He's been busy with school, but we would all appreciate it. And to leave you off with a hint of what's to come, since next week is Valentine's Day week, we have a special episode versus episode video podcast episode for you guys. Because Goosebumps doesn't really have Valentine's stories. I mean, it kind of does, but there's more obvious choices than other IPs. So we decided to do Haunting Hour versus Are You Afraid of the Dark? Now, for Haunting Hour, we're doing Terrible Love. And for Are You Afraid of the Dark, we're doing The Tale of the Last Dance. So stay tuned for that. It's definitely going to be a loved theme episode. So we might be wearing red. You might see some hearts going on in the chat like this. Who knows? But stay tuned. We all love you, and hope to see y'all next time. Take care. Have a good night, everyone.